Today in Luther's Kitchen, we're making black bean gorditas. And gorditas are basically stuffed, thick tortillas. That's how I look at it. So to begin with, we're making some dough using masa harina, which is corn flour. It's the main ingredient in corn tortillas. We added to that some all-purpose flour, baking powder, and kosher salt, and just whisk that very well. Then you want to put in a couple tablespoons of canola oil, and you want to whisk that until you see little crumbles form. Then slowly stream in some warm water, and we're using a wooden spoon or a silicone spoon would be just fine. So you want to stir it first with a spoon until it's all incorporated before you get your hands in there and knead it. So slowly stream in the water. You may not need all of it, but it's really important that the water is warm. Once all the water has been incorporated, you want to get your hands in there and you want to knead it for no more than 2 minutes. It should come together and form a nice, smooth, soft ball. So if you over knead it, that's going to be problematic. And if it's too dry, you can add a little bit of water, just a tablespoon at a time. So get in there and knead it until you form a smooth ball. Once your mixture is nice and smooth, you want to cover it with a moist towel and let it sit for 15 minutes. So what we did was we rolled these out after 15 minutes, and now we're covering these with a moistened paper towel because we're making these ahead of time, so we're not actually going to make the gorditas until tomorrow. So you can always make this in advance. Cover it with a wet paper towel and then plastic wrap it really well and store it in the fridge. Now we're going to make our bean filling mixture. So we're going to toast some dried New Mexico chilies. You want to use a couple of these, and we just cut them into chunks, and it's a good idea to take the seeds and the ribs out. And you want to toast it until you start to smell it and it becomes very fragrant. Don't burn it. In the blender, we already have in there 2 cups of black beans that have been prepared. You can use canned black beans, but make sure you rinse and drain them first, or you can use homemade. So we've got homemade beans in there. And to that, we put those toasty chilies, a little bit of water, a garlic clove, and some cumin. And you want to blend it until it's all pureed. And then we're going to basically fry it. So we're kind of making refried beans. So we're taking a couple tablespoons of canola oil, and then we're going to put that bean mixture in once the canola oil is hot. And you want to stir it together until this mixture thickens, but be careful, you don't want it to dry out. So this should only take a few minutes, and then at that point you should taste for seasoning. It may need some salt depending on how salty your black beans were when you started. And if you want to add a little more heat, put some black pepper. Now we transferred that black bean mixture to a bowl and allowed it to cool while we cooked our gorditas. So in order to make your gorditas, you want to make like a tortilla, but these are going to be thicker. So just by hand, you want to take each ball that was rolled out earlier, and you want to go back and forth between your 2 palms, pressing using the heel of your hands. You don't want them to be thicker than 1/4 of an inch, which is fairly thin, and they should be about 3 to 4 inches in diameter, depending on how big you scooped out your balls of dough to begin with. So we made a full batch of this, and we ended up with quite a bit of gorditas. I want to say about 15 or so, but the recipe that I wrote up that goes with this, we just did half, so you should make about 8. Now we have a griddle pan here that we put a little bit of canola oil on with paper towel, and we're going to put our gorditas that are ready to cook on the griddle pan. The griddle pan has been heating up, so it's very hot, and as soon as it gets super hot, I then lower the heat to medium, between medium and medium high. Now these have to sit on one side for about 6 to 8 minutes, or until you see, like you can see here, they're golden brown and they started to puff up a bit. Carefully turn them over, and then they have to cook for another 6 to 8 minutes. It's really crucial that you let them cook thoroughly, otherwise they're going to be totally raw in the center, and that's not very pleasant. So once your gorditas are done, let them cool for a bit. And then you carefully want to make a slit in the center and roll your knife around. I'm using a small paring knife. You don't want to completely cut it open to have two sides of it. So this way you're going to stuff it. We're going to put the bean mixture inside this pocket that we're creating with the paring knife. So roll the knife around and just make a nice opening to put the filling. You could put shredded chicken, you could put shredded beef, shredded pork. This is a vehicle for all sorts of deliciousness. But we're going to use that mixture, that bean mixture, and just spread it around in there. This is, without the cheese, this is a vegan dish, which is nice and lovely. And it's without the all-purpose flour in the mix of the masa, it could be gluten-free. But we're going to put cheese because salty cheese with this is so amazing. So we've got some cotija cheese, but you could use queso fresco. You could even put feta cheese in, or some shredded Mexican cheese blend. For this recipe and more, visit myclasscancook.com.